Okay, so it's 2 past, so I think I might just get started and have Jeff jump on when he can. And I want to share screen on the agenda. Okay, so if I could get privileges, Selena, that'd be great. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay. And it's not letting me. Okay. Okay, I think I know what happened. I have a new computer and it's not quite set up. Okay, so what I'll do is, if I may, drop this in the chat for you. Okay, and then there's Jeff. And could you share that?
I could try.
Hi, good evening, Jeff. Okay, great. So here's our agenda today, September 26th. So just want to report out on progress goals in the schedule, and then we'll have a few updates from you all. Then really looking forward to the work that May and Nazneen have done to come up with a proposed recommendation on youth and schools. The bulk of the time will be on discussing draft policy recommendations. That's all 5 of them. So we'll start to take a crack at that and then wrap up with some next steps and next meeting. Is there anything that should be included today that you would like to see and don't see on the agenda? Okay, barring none, then May, I'd like you to just back up like the 2 slides previous to the agenda or after the agenda. Oh, okay, so it's after.
Sorry, I'm like trying to put it in presenter view so that you can see everything, but it's not letting me advance. Let me escape out of that. How do I get out of? Oh, is it this one?
There we go. Okay, great. So where we are in terms of progress, and we're making good clip. I've had to create a second slide, right? So we've have 5 cohort meetings under our belt now, and with the work that May and Nazneen have done on youth and schools, we are going to do a little deep dive into that. We're plugging along with our meetings, some more getting scheduled. And then next slide, May. And the community survey went out. I saw that. Thank you very much, Juan. And then last week, May and I and Selena, I saw Selena, attended the anti-bias forum that was co-hosted by Montgomery County's Commission on Civil Rights, as well as Howard counties and PG counties. And that was an excellent all-day forum. We took notes, and that was provided to you, over email. So wanted just to see if any of you had any questions for us about that event. All good? Okay, great. So I went over the agenda where we are today. And so where we are in the entire schedule is that we will be, taking that first pass on the 5 recommendations, continuing that the next meeting, and begin to finalize it the meeting after that. And I think then we may have one more meeting right before our November 9th presentation on the actual mechanics of doing the presentation. But that's basically our schedule for the next month, 5 weeks or so. Any questions about the schedule or where we're headed? Okay, great. Well, that is all for me. So I'm going to turn it back over on the agenda to the reports. and wanted to check in with Juan. Juan, like community survey. How are we doing? Were you able to get contacts for all the organizations? And where do you need our help?
Okay, so the community survey went out last week and with a deadline of this past Friday. And unfortunately, we only received 10 responses. So I extended it. And I've also reached out to Christina Poi, who is the director, for the AAPI and South Asian Commission, the Governor's Commission for API Affairs and South Asian Affairs. So she, I saw that she forwarded them out this afternoon as well. So I extended it for another week. So the deadline now is this coming Friday. Hoping to get more responses because I don't think 10 is good, and I want to thank Nazneen because I think her organization submitted at least three out of the 10 surveys that we have. So, but I'm hoping to get maybe at least 10 more, so that we have a good group. One of the things I noticed from the surveys, a couple of organizations. One is with I think it's the Sikh Foundation, which is a South Asian organization, particularly for that religion. And also we receive response from someone from the Jain organization, which is another religious organization. So I'm noticing, those two groups. Fortunately, they did respond to our survey, but I wonder if there are many other religions that need to be included. I do need to reach out to a couple of the Buddhist organizations as well, and there are a couple that were mentioned by Karen Lynn, who actually helped us design the survey. She has contact with a Zen Buddhist organization. So, and I have contacts with the Cambodian Buddhist Society. So they're a huge organization that I hope they can provide some input on. So, so that's what we have so far. And I think what I'm going to do is, I know some of you have volunteered to reach out to some of the organizations that you know of, and I think I'll reach out to you individually and say, hey, can you reach out to this organization now, because they should have somebody, and if they don't, you can just forward the survey to them if they haven't received it. Okay, and that is all I have to report, pending any questions.
So I'm wondering, did anybody else because I know when we were at the APAG meeting, the Asian Pacific American Advisory Group meeting, we had asked people to do it. I think that the one woman who was from the Sikh community, she was very interested in giving her information.
Yes.
But I'm wondering if like CCACC or KCSC, do we need to follow up with them or any of the other organizations that are on the advisory group? One, and then two is that I know I work with several social service groups that are APA groups, and I'm hoping that they have responded. If not, I can reach out to like the Asian APA DVRP and A lead, because we work with them, and I know that they both have anti-bullying, anti-hate programs.
CCACC did respond, but I have not gotten a response from some
The
of the
Korean Community Service.
Sorry?
The Korean Community Service Center yet? No,
I haven't seen a response from KCSC yet.
Okay.
Yeah, they're a major organization as well.
Yeah. Did you get one from A lead, Juan?
I don't believe I saw one. I'm just going through back to make sure here.
Because I'm just wondering if, you can read out some of the organizations that you and Nazneen have not yet contacted or named today. And we'll just take assignments now. So I can do Mokopan and A lead. I can do the Indonesian American Association also.
Okay. I'll tell you which organizations have responded. That's so we've got. So we actually also, it sounds like a business. It says Heritage Series LLC is one.
I don't know. Anyone know that?
Yeah, I don't know.
Can Juan, can you follow up on them?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I mean, they've responded.
Oh, they responded.
Now,
Okay.
these are the people that I'll tell you the 10 that I've
Okay.
so that you know who has not responded. The Jain Society of Metropolitan Washington. So that's a religious
Mhm.
organization. That's pretty. CCACC has submitted a response. The Maryland Vietnamese Mutual Association. Okay, yep. And APA LRC has responded, and I think we believe we got like 3, including Nazneen. LRC. Okay, so it's called I don't know how to pronounce this correctly, but the Cohort Foundation. I believe that's the Sikh organization, KAUR. Okay. And that is, let me see here. Person and yes, that is the Sikh organization. And then let's see. APLRC. I got something from the Miriam's Kitchen in DC. Thank you, May. And Mokopan, I think. And Ariani, I think that's yours that was the original. I don't know if you wanted me to keep that or that was just a test case.
Yes, if you could, thank you.
Keep it?
I already filled out the survey.
Yeah, when we were doing the test. Oh, I'm sorry. That was Mokopan. So I don't know if when we were doing the testing, but we didn't. I don't know if you wanted me to. I'll keep it, and then if you want to have other somebody else respond as well from the organization, that'd be fine.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay.
Okay, so thank you, May, for putting the link of the list of organizations in the chat. I think what I'm doing right now, I would encourage others of you as well to do is just to put down your name in column C if you can do the outreach. And that way we can see who is missing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then Juan, just to point you to follow up with anyone who you see has not already signed up for those organizations to contact. Does that sound good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. That way we can move along, but thank you so much for your efforts. And we have just a few days, so let's start doing those follow-ups today or tomorrow.
Yep.
Okay.
And I will forward to you the survey in case somebody, says, oh, I didn't get it, so then you can just forward it to them. Okay.
Just a quick note, I switched around the columns a little bit because the column C was the point of contact for the organization that we wanted to respond. So I just made column C the volunteer point of contact follow-up. Because I saw you, Ariana, you had put a comma because the point of contact is Hanla, for example, for the IF Foundation.
Oh, okay. Thank
So-
you. So you want to move me over to C then?
Yeah,
The ones,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
That
Yep.
works.
Yep.
Awesome.
I can move some, yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Juan. Thank you, May. Jeff, do you have any updates for us on the government relations side?
Yeah, upcoming, we have a meeting September 29th with Yishen and Community Partnerships. And then next Tuesday, we have a meeting with Tiffany Ward out of the Office of Racial Equity. That's October 3rd. So we'll hopefully have summaries and updates and any action items for everyone here. And we'll follow up shortly.
Okay, great. And I was also remiss last week to mention, and speaking briefly with Selena on a logistical issue, I took advantage of that call to ask her a few questions. So thank you, Selena, for your feedback as well. Nazneen, any cohort meetings that have occurred between the last time and this time that you might have attended, or any?
I have not, I'm sorry. And
That's
I
all right.
was checking the schedule and I know that because we were supposed to have the meeting last week, right? And that got canceled. So I don't think there was anything else scheduled for last week.
No worries, no worries. And even if there are, and you happen to attend them and you have a readout in terms of anything that might be pertinent to the report, or just in terms of things that we might want to know, let us know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So now we're up to that agenda item where we're going to hear from May and Nazneen. I know you've gotten together in between the meetings and really delved into the materials related to schools and youth. And why don't you just share with us what your review was and your proposal?
So I'm going to let May take the lead because she did all of this. We talked a lot and we really discussed the different things that we had heard from the different, from this group, from the students, and that May had really heard from people she had talked to within the schools. So May, I'm going to let you take the lead on this.
Yeah, I think we wanted to bring attention to the whole cohort that there was recently done an anti-racist system audit and recently shared anti-racist system action plan. So I know I went through it, and I think we just wanted to name that those were done, which is a big effort. And we wanted to build on that, recognizing there's a whole lot in there. But that was just a goal. We wanted to recognize that there was a lot of effort put into there and hopefully build and expand on that. I think something that Nazneen and I walked away with was, hearing from APSU representatives, hearing from teachers, hearing from students. It seems like there was a lack of consistency on what was on the training, on the conversations that people were hearing when it came to what is being currently provided. And that was echoed in the findings of the audit. So there's a lot of recommendations already kind of in process that I think have yet to be unfolded. So I think we were struggling a little bit of where to begin when they seem to be in the process of a lot of these. So I think, I shared the link. I don't know if folks want me to walk through it because I know you're busy and you didn't quite get a chance to look through it. So just kind of laying that foundation of what some of the key references we were looking at that kind of informed what we were recommending, so that how hate has been a big issue. 29 out of 36 focus groups of the students mentioned this. McKnight had been quoted about 1 hateful incident per day, but at the conference she was saying 2 incidents per school per day. Fact check me, Ariani. But that's what I heard, and I was kind of blown away by that, but also not surprised. And seeing in the anti-racist audit you know, that it was really focused on bullying, harassment, discrimination. And that, you know, they could be strengthened by defining examples of hate bias, I think. So just kind of like building on the foundations they have and how to expand on that. So, and then also just, you know, I think the point of number 5 was, what are the unique scenarios for our community? So I think we definitely named language barriers, cultural proficiency as being some of the unique things to our community. So, you know, kind of really, I think what stuck out was the consistency. Like a lot of efforts are being made. There's some that are like, you know, going well, and then some maybe not. That we kind of focused on the consistency, and we kind of came together as like, well, what if there was a central unit or division that was focused on hate and bias, and that kind of like reviewed all of the reports and make sure that they're being responded to in a consistently across schools. But we also, again, like not necessarily knowing the school system of like what's already in place, I think is the huge caveat of all of this. And then also I think Nazanin and Ariana, you both asked like, you know, the purview of this is a recommendation, but MCPS kind of operates separately, I think is the big question mark. So we don't know how much of this can really be in place. So I think, you know, that was like kind of the overarching theme though, is like, how do we make this more consistent across the school? Is there a unit or division within MCPS or outside of MCPS that really helps systematize efforts across the education and engagement, across the training? What are the clear protocols for reporting hate bias, and then support for the victims? So I think underneath there are just kind of some bullet points of ideas. I don't think we'll necessarily get into the specificity, but sometimes you have to like dive down into the workings to figure out how many clicks back up you need to come back to. And then I also just shared some feedback from a couple of teachers and parents who I shared it with, just to try to get their feedback, who might have a better understanding of the school system. So I'll stop there. I'll also just quickly copy the link and put it in the chat because I don't know how well you can see this.
Sorry, I will say that, you know, one of the things that even reading the audit, I was reading the executives, going through the executive summary because the actual audit is very long, and I wanted to just dive down into what were the key points and things. And a lot of it was the consistency across schools. Like it really depended how they dealt with incidents of bias and hate, really depended on the school itself. And so, you know, May and I were talking, it was really like, it needs to be taken out of the schools. It needs to be a central location if possible. And, you know, granted, you know, and I did bring up the concern that, you know, how do we make this into a recommendation that the council can actually move on, because MCPS is a separate entity from the council and from the executive's office.
Yeah.
And
I think, sorry, go ahead, Nazanin.
No, I was just going to say, I have no idea how to make that happen. I've still been thinking.
Yeah, one feedback that sat with me was from a teacher who was like, you know, all the teachers every year have to go through a child neglect and abuse training, and now they know it by heart. And they know the training, they know the signs, they know what the protocols are. And I feel like that was something that stuck with me, because I was like, well, how can we make this also like by heart? They know what the protocols are across the board. And she was saying that they have to do this training every single year. It's asynchronous. You watch a you know, those webinars, you have to take a test after. I'm not saying that's the only answer. I think that might be a part of it. But I just thought it was interesting to potentially compare to what other trainings are there that teachers feel like they have a good handle on. Whereas this sounds like this is a little bit newer. So yeah, the lack of consistency in the training, I think really came through.
Thank you for your review of the plan and the outreach to other stakeholders in order to come up with this recommendation. I had a couple of thoughts and questions, and the overarching one is the one that Nazanin raised, which is sort of the jurisdiction. And
Okay.
so I think you are both right in that the current process has not yet played out, because there had been some, I think, broad scale changes. And that was reported to us in our very first anti-hate crime, the full task force meeting. So we heard from Damon Monteleone, and I believe he's with Student Welfare and Compliance, but that's where they situate the response to bias incidents and crimes at MCPS now. And if you may recall, they had not only revamped the reporting form, but had an entire process, and there was a flow chart that he showed, and there were different teams that would come in and play different roles, and some of them were like supportive for the students, some were more reporting, but at least we know from the response from the students that sort of midway through the flow chart, where they get to the point where they're turning around communications, outside to the school community, that's being executed very well. So I'm wondering if this recommendation is going to focus on an entity outside of the school district, what would it be that would be supplemental or a task that MCPS could not do themselves? And so in a different context on the federal government, because I've done some work there, for us, it's about, perhaps like the appeals process, independent oversight to provide that accountability, which cannot be relied on within an agency. And so I'm wondering if that was sort of the direction that you were going, but if it's more about consistency, then, perhaps the existence of this new process and this office, do you want to allow for some time to play out before, sort of making these recommendations for a new entity? I hope that makes sense.
I think that there's a lot going on with MCPS, and you're right, we don't know, because they're just, the report was, the information I think was between 2020 and 2022 that they gathered all this information and they did this audit. So they're in the process of putting their plan in action, their action plan together and putting it forth. But even so, like, even with the it was interesting because everything really was the consistency of it. It really was just depending on the school. But I think the issue is that what recommendation it can be made to the council in a way that they can actually take some action on it, like that is actionable by them. I don't know if it's that we say that, these are the issues we recommend that the council, put forth to MCPS that they should, develop an office that, that handles this type of issue, especially given what's been going on in the county, and be more so that the schools, the school system has a consistent response team to these actions instead of being it based on, depending on the school that that it happens at. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think, with the examples you gave, Ariane, is it an appeals process or independent oversight? I don't know if there is a similar outside body that provides oversight. Like, is there an example of this? Because I'm kind of in this, like, I don't know what I don't know, but I do think there is some type of a need of an independent body to especially to both hold them accountable, but also I think with the specific hate bias lens, I think the anti-racism audit was amazing and gathered a lot of material, but just in those simple things of like, here are the recommendations to address a specific type of hate, racism, which is, a big issue. We know that we've heard time and again that the two groups that have been targeted the most have been the anti-Semitic kind of sentiment, but also anti-Black. But it just seems like when one of the questions that kind of popped up when I read the audit was, is anti-racism and anti-hate the same thing? And when I kind of like looked into it, it just felt like it was there's definitely a big overlap, but just adding an anti-hate lens seemed to account for other experiences, especially outside of the race spectrum. And so it just seemed to me like there needs to be a lot of work to expand some of the current policies of MCPS from bullying and discrimination to actually naming, in addition to the anti-racism, some of the anti-hate language that I've seen in some of the other policy and recommendations that has been shared.
And I'm wondering, I mean, maybe the recommendation isn't for MCPS, but for the council to put together a committee or put together a team that deals with youth and hate bias incidents that they perpetrate against each other or to certain groups, and is a sort of a response team that the council has to address these issues, and that parents can call, students can call, have a hotline or something that is available, that is actually and there's a team that is culturally has cultural diversity and ethnic diversity to handle the types of issues that come up.
And I think another way to put it, Ariane, is like, I definitely don't want to replace necessarily what MCPS is doing. I do want this to be complementary and supplementary and of their efforts, but just to make sure we fill in the gaps. But it is kind of, like you said, a lot of things are recent and they've not yet been fully played out. So in some ways, to me, that underlies, like, is there an outside body that's monitoring, watching how it's playing out, looking for additional gaps? I worry a little bit that within the action plan, and even we've heard from Monteleone and McKnight was like, we can't staff our way out of this, we can't resource it. So to me, it sounds like we're asking teachers to take on more on top of what they're already doing. And I just feel like it might be the third or fourth bullet among all the other to-dos that they have. And so to have something that is an explicit focus, I think I wrote on the very, very top, I saw under the state attorney's office, there are divisions dedicated to gangs, gun prosecution, felony trial, juvenile court, special prosecution, and special victims. And I've seen in other governments, like, again, just through Google, that they actually have created a hate division. And so I'm not sure if that's already like, it's the hate committee, like I've heard of like the hate committee or the hate commission. So I don't know if that exists. It's just called something different and maybe it's not listed on the website. But that was just something I noticed.
Okay, this is really helpful. Jeff or Juan, do you have any feedback to give?
So question I have is, so where are the recommendations? Because I think, how many recommendations are we planning to provide out of this youth and schools?
It's one with a lot of sub bullets. That's the
Okay, that's what I was trying to figure out. I thought, okay, it looked like a
it's a very wonky sub bulleted thing that needs to be cleaned up. But yes, I think the effort was to make it a one focused on youth and schools, but figuring out the right layer of specificity that needs to be had there. And we might be throwing a lot of these into the appendix that they will allow, of like notes to consider.
Okay, so what I've been hearing is just in MCPS, it's just there's, I guess, would it be a lack of consistency on how it's being addressed, and so I guess that sounds to me like one of the main recommendations is provide a way, come up with a way for them to have more consistency. I mean, we don't have to come up with a solution. It's, let somebody else come up with the solution, but we can come up with a recommendation, right? We know what the problem is, so I think we can say, okay, we can say, okay, there needs to be more consistency, for example. And then, I don't know that it'll be up to and this can be for the MCPS too. It doesn't necessarily have to be for the council, right? That's what we were told. We can, and then let them figure out how to come up with more consistency. But at least we point out what the issue is that needs to be addressed.
Before we, I think this is really helpful. I think the recommendation makes a ton of sense, including many of the sub bullets. I guess my question for this group here is there a way that we can propose this recommendation to them prior to November? Communicating with them appears to be something that is more of an it's requiring a little more protocol. So and maybe we'll get more answers as to like if who's the current lead on this, at least from a responsibility perspective, or maybe it was an idea they've discussed and maybe there's reasons for this, cost or otherwise. But I think that would probably be a worthy effort. I'd be curious to see what folks have to say. I think it's a very meaningful recommendation. I just want to make sure that it's something that we can have that refinement conversation with them. I don't know what your thoughts might be on that, if we're able to do it for that matter.
So I'm still sort of hung up on the jurisdictional issue because generally the county council's relationship with respect to MCPS is passing a budget for MCPS, and then it delegates the oversight over the school district to MCPS, right? I think it's a very good recommendation, including all of the sub bullets, but I see all of that being duties and responsibilities of those within MCPS. And so now though, there's a couple of offices within, headquarters who might be able to do an overview of consistency. I don't know if that is one of the charges. That could be a question that we ask, right? And as a follow-up, to give them more time to implement this new process and allow the new position in the office, well, it's new to me because I haven't tuned in for about 3 years or 3.5 since my daughter graduated. But one idea that the county council could do, right, is to convene an independent review panel. And, just to check in on specifically how this new response to hate crimes is coming along, or the implementation of the, anti-racist plan. But since we're the anti-hate crime task force, maybe it's just focusing on hate crimes specifically. And consistency can be one of those factors across schools that it can look at. What do you all think about that?
Recommending an independent review?
Right. So if there are stakeholders outside of the school who are not like the paid staff, administrators, teachers, right? Students, parents, community leaders who have concerns about issues like consistency across schools. And we now know that there's this office, the Student Welfare and Compliance Office, right? That is they're specifically tasked with dealing with hate crimes, right? An outside body appointed by the council can check in and make sure that the consistency actually exists. That's one way of monitoring and supporting, ensuring that the community's interest in this work is on track.
On past issues, I'm just asking from a structure perspective, is there a ombudsman or an inspector general? I mean, I would think that that would be the place to house it if they're concerned about adding more layers. That might be a place that might be worthy of a charge.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I didn't think about the ombudsman, but the inspector general is generally fraud, waste, abuse, so I'm not sure it would go there. The ombudsman also I thought might be more, I don't know, individual as opposed to community wide. But what I was trying to do was balance the interests that you all are articulating about having an outside, entity also share in this work without them actually getting into the nuts and bolts of the work that's generally reserved for MCPS headquarters staff. That's what I was trying to do. But that's another question. So how about in our questions we ask about that? Like, who are you going to look at consistency across schools? Is there an ombudsman? And what does that person do? And could that person take on this role? Yeah, May's nodding her head. Okay.
Yeah, I think it sounds good. I mean, I'm also like, I know we said youth in schools. The question that remains is like, is there anything else that we feel is important that's happened that needs to be done also outside of schools, right? Like, I don't want to forget that piece of like, we kind of grouped youth in schools together, and school and youth are often in schools, but just kind of doing a brain check of like, as I look through my notes as we go through this, like, is there something that needs to be done outside of school? And the thing that still comes to mind is if there, I've heard a need of like a overarching like media campaign or public awareness campaign around anti-hate that doesn't necessarily fall under just youth in schools. It might be, across the board, and that might fall under the multicultural kind of like box. So it might be addressed through one of the other avenues, but that was just like where my mind is kind of turning of like, what might be, we might be leaving off if we're potentially focused on the school aspect, which I think is important, but not everything.
Yeah, we're on the same wavelength actually. And I was going to ask if anyone had experience with ADL school programs, because they have a program, and I forgot what it's called, Teach for Tolerance, something similar to that, but it's set up as a facilitation program to allow for student-led conversations on race and prejudice, right? So it's really fascinating, and there are a number of schools that have adopted it, but I don't think as enough. And years and years ago, from what I understand, they also could be staffed with community volunteers. So then that brings us to the next question: how much community support is needed in order to ensure such a program exists in every single school? And rallying, volunteers from the community to take that on could be, a future project.
I think that's a really good question, Ariani, because I think something that also stuck out at the hate bias forum that we attended was, that beginning question that Dr. Monite asked the room, right? Like, who's your first teacher? And it's not the teacher in the school, it's our parents. And like, there needs to be more community involvement and more resources for the community. So I think that that's a really good point to keep in mind of like, maybe that's where it does feel like MCPS is taking some really solid efforts to bulk up this, but I think what falls outside of their jurisdiction is the community support and what is out there for the larger community and parents and things like that. And maybe that is a worthy recommendation, just so that it is complementary to what they're doing already.
Well, and I also think if we're looking at the AAPI community, it's, educating parents and families on the importance of reporting and these incidents, and not only incidents that occur to them as adults, but for what is happening to their children. Because I think that, again, one of the things that within our communities that is really difficult to know is the actual number of hate bias incidents, because people do not report. we hear about them, in passing and things, or it's something's really egregious. But we don't hear about the incidents where someone's like, oh, that's we don't need to report that because, it's not affecting X, Y, and Z, even though it probably is affecting X, Y, and Z, right? So I think that, looking at recommendations, if we're looking at, something for this community, for our communities, it's possibly, looking at how do we do like PSAs or something that really look at what is happening in the Asian community and really targeting a message to them on why it's important to report these incidents, either to the schools, to the police, to whoever, so that there is accurate reporting and so that, education can be done, and, there's more of a response. Because again, you look at the statistics and things, and there's so few that actually, look at what's happening within the Asian community because, again, of non-reporting.
Yeah, and that speaks to our community-related recommendation, doesn't it? Absolutely. And the other thing related to schools is that as the feedback from the 2 students from OPSU had been really helpful, an ongoing connection between students and community is helpful. And so what Mokopan has been trying to do, and that I think I would continue your support with even after the task force, is supporting the student clubs in different schools, and then more importantly, to help connect them so that they're also communicating and they can voice collectively what their needs are. And, where appropriate, we can lift them up at the level of the principals or the headquarters level, right? So there are issues similar to there's not a consistency in schools. I think that feedback would be valuable. So May and Nazneen, did we capture the main interests in the recommendation through these other alternative pathways? Because if not, let's identify what those other interests are.
I'm feeling pretty good because I think the thing that stuck out was consistency, and so we're trying to tackle that. And I'm hearing the better vehicles of the Student Welfare and Compliance Office that you mentioned, because and that looks like a pretty good option. And then Jeff's recommendation for the Ombudsman as another option. I can't remember if there was something else, but definitely want to leverage like existing agency vehicles, like not necessarily having to create something explicitly new. So definitely grateful for everyone's knowledge and expertise of structures that can provide this role and accountability and oversight and feedback. And
yeah, I agree. And I think that what we should add in is that, just really, again, focusing on the AAPI community is that what is needed with it, what types of education or what types of things that does this community need to understand the importance of reporting and the effects that non-reporting or the effects that these incidents can have on the children or youth, including mental health issues, even issues with self-esteem, all of that, like, how it can really impact them and why it's important for these organizations to look at the consistency, to make sure that things are culturally appropriate, to make sure that there are services and understanding for the different ethnic communities and specifically for our community because of the underreporting that happens and how that can adversely impact youth within the AAPI community.
Yeah. I mean, I think the one additional thing is, besides the consistency from the agency, was and I had this under the reporting section, right? Like they have different forms, vehicles for students to report. I think there was something that we saw in the forum that a lot of people don't want to report. They feel like, hey, it's not a big deal. It actually feels more of a burden for me to report this than just to go on my day. And so there's a little bit of a something where it feels like we need to ease reporting across the board, not just for students. So that's something that still also sticks out with me about, and then Again, Ariane and I think you both have definitely underlined the need for mental health resources. And I think that also stuck out with the example that I think Ishan gave at the forum of just like, he shared examples of like a student who would just eat by herself in the bathroom because she didn't feel like she had anyone to support her or talk to her about her experience about experiencing hate as a Asian female. And the stat that was shared that Asian youth females have a high rate of suicide. Just wanted to say that out loud again about that need for mental health in general, especially in this age that's been compounded by social media and the pandemic and everything else. So that might just be another layer besides the consistency.
I know. So I'm wondering if part of the recommendation, or somehow it's the recommendation, is to more fully support groups like AA Lead, who work with youth in schools, and the Asian American Health Initiative that work, with the Asian community on different health matters, and they do a lot for mental health issues, but that really focus on but can focus more on youth and the different aspects that youth, the services that youth need, especially culturally specific mental health services.
Yes, absolutely. That is definitely already written as a recommendation. And I would suggest, in terms of next step on this recommendation related to youth in schools, to follow with MCPS on consistency and the ombudsman, and then also ADL, just to check in on the status of their Teach for Tolerance program. And then we'll continue to finesse it more. So this has been a really great conversation. Thank you so much for the forework that you've done. Otherwise, we haven't been able to move through this so quickly. So with the remaining time, I just wanted to, let me flash, the Jamboard actually is another place that I wanted to share with you all. But we're I think low on time. Let me just say this: if you go to the Jamboard link and you page past those 3 big bucket of categories with the post-its, you'll see the beginnings of drafting of recommendations, and they're in part based on, thank you, on our conversation from the last meeting. And what I did was just took the liberty to really fill out the one about funding. But in terms of the AAPI community, we, yeah, you could either go back or forward several times. I kind of copied and pasted what's in black in the middle there. In the middle, I'm trying to distill the recommendation on these thoughts, and a lot of it had to do with education and public awareness raising. Other things had to do with representation and a smattering of other things as well. So I would say that before our next meeting, maybe we can toy around. This is what I'll do. I will email to you some proposed language that distills this. It probably will have a number of subsets, A through C, and see if you think that accurately captures our conversations from that last meeting. And similarly, I'll do one for the cross community one as well. In fact, the way I think this might happen is that for youth in schools, we could have 1 or 2 recommendations, AAPI community, 1 or 2 recommendations, and cross community, 1. So that's how I'm thinking it's going to kind of land. And if you keep paging, May, thank you. Yeah, you'll see this is the funding indicator. And then if you page again, then there's some, yeah, that's where I was going to start to draft some recommendations. So let me do that. And so that will be my homework. And we will move from there. So are you all comfortable with that process of shaping the recommendations? Okay, great. So in terms of next steps, we're clear, right? Yes, okay. And then any other announcements that you all want to make before I turn it over to May to let us know when our next meeting is?
So I just forward all of you the survey. So if you talk to one of your organizations and say they haven't gotten it, you can certainly share that one with them.
Okay, great. Yes,
Right.
please
Vaughn,
plug in your name.
did you email it to us or is it in the chat?
Emailed it.
Okay, great.
You can just forward it to them. And the survey itself is in the email as well, so that they can kind of get a brief preview of at least the first few questions.
Great. So make sure to put your name next to some organizations to help out with getting that survey circulated and completed for the Friday deadline. And then May, when is our next meeting?
Our next meeting is October 3rd, then this October 17th, and then November 1st. Thank you, Celina, for sending the updated links. And I wanted to also just check in quickly, Ariani, because this is my last week off, quote unquote, before I start my new job. So if there's any way that I can try to use this time to be helpful, I know there was a certain format for the presentation that was like, what does hate look like in your community? So I was going to volunteer to be like, maybe I could start looking at the things to like draft the beginning pieces that is not recommendation related, but just like the context of here's what hate looks like in our community. I can volunteer to do that.
Yeah, that's great. That's something we haven't talked about is, do we kind of want to take a page from our friends in the Jewish American cohort and, go over a little bit of history, a little bit about a community, or zero in or what hate looks like. Yes, that would be really helpful. Thank you, May.
Yeah,
So let's offline about that.
Yep,
Okay.
will do. I'm happy to start a swing and then share it with you all.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Great meeting. Thank you all. Good
Thanks,
night.
everybody. Bye.